It's been a long, hot summer here in Miami. School is starting for many. We are back to work. Politics, health, economy. You might feel a little bit entangled. Do not worry. Weekly Quantum World Detangled, Season 2, Episode 1. We are back.
Everyone, Denise Ruffner, Chief Business Officer from Cambridge Quantum Computing, located in the land of fires, California, packed and ready to evacuate, but don't have to go yet. And my friend Tommaso.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Tommaso from Singapore, CEO of Entropic Labs. Very happy to be back with all of you.
My name is André König. I'm the CEO of Interference Advisors, and we're excited to have a very special guest for Season 2, Episode 1, coming to us from Tennessee and Zapata Computing. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Christopher Savoie. I'm the founder and CEO of Zapata Computing, coming to you from the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee.
Beautiful. And Chris, when I prepared this, obviously, you're a well-known figure in quantum. I have more questions for you than there are qubits in the IBM cloud, but one thing that stuck out to me was your Twitter profile, and there are these Japanese characters in it. So I Googled them, and it seems to be a name, Savoie Kurisu.
Yes.
How do you pronounce it? What does it mean, and how do you get a Japanese name?
Savoie Kurisu is basically the transliteration of my name, Christopher Savoie. But Christopher would have meant lots of kanji, and that's really hard to sign my name. It would take forever, even just signing a bank deposit statement. So I chose not to have the full name Christopher. Although I do in English go by Christopher, not Chris. But I'm Kurisu formally in Japanese. That's my formal last name, which is my first name in Japanese. Why? Because I'm actually a Japanese national. So after graduate school and after a career in Japan, I naturalized as a Japanese citizen. And that's why I have a Japanese name. I had to choose a Japanese name so that I would have Japanese characters, Chinese characters, to write my name natively in the language. I got it. I could to the English pronunciation of Savoie, my last name.
A fascinating culture, and so you have the Japanese name. I'm sure you speak Japanese, write Japanese. I heard you talk about Judo. It's a culture that you're still very close to, and you have an office in Japan with Zapata, I believe.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Judo's my hobby. I've done it for a long time. Actually, a black belt in judo, and in the USA, a national level coach and referee. So it's something I really enjoy. I teach kids when we're not in COVID times, and I really enjoy that. It's a really, really good, not just sport, but discipline. To help kids, I think, in their development. So I really enjoy doing that.
Martial arts is fantastic. I studied ninjutsu for 3 months, and we told that story on this podcast before. So we won't repeat it. You studied medicine. You got a JD. You worked in natural language. Did you just decide to dominate the world when you were a little boy, or how did all of this come about, this career path?
I guess the more charitable way is I couldn't figure out what I want to do when I grow up, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I guess is the way to say that. But yeah, no, I went into medicine, but I realized, unfortunately, I'll be very honest, I'm kind of a hypochondriac. I can't watch the TV series House without fainting. Not literally fainting, but really, I really realized I didn't want to do clinical medicine. Took a research path in biophysics, actually, which I enjoyed tremendously. And then I moved more and more during my career there into things like molecular modeling and computation and computer-based things, based on the background of me having started computing and programming from a very young age. And so this was my way of actually getting into computation without having an undergraduate background in that area. So I went more and more away from actual viruses into computer viruses and that world, I guess is a nice way of saying it. And that led to the sequence work that I did, led to what became a distributed architecture that we used to create this technology that became the basis for Siri's natural language understanding engine. And so onward it went from there.
And one last thing I have to ask you, back to Twitter. I don't know if that's true, if you feel the same way or not. It seems to me that you're getting a lot of shit from the quantum bullshit detector. Is that true? Why is that? And can we help you?
Yeah, well, I think that if you follow the quantum bullshit detector, whoever this is or whoever these people are, they use the royal we, so I don't know what that really means, but you'll find that many esteemed companies who put out papers like IBM or even Google are also targets of the ire of this group of whatever people it is. So, you know, I kind of take it as a badge of honor in some way, because I'm also a target alongside Google and IBM and the supremacy experiment. Hey, if I can be up there with John Martinez getting bullshitted by the bullshit detector, I guess I'm in pretty good company. That would be the way I look at it. And then you look at all the academic papers and academic complexity theory types of things that get praised from the bullshit detector as not bullshit. And then I say, wow, maybe I'm in really good company, because that stuff will never lead to a commercial offering ever. So, you know, in some way I take it in good jest. I think it's good in some way to create a conversation in the community. Do I always agree with those kind of things? No, but hey, that goes with the territory. If you're out there on the cutting edge, then you're going to get cut a little bit, and that's okay.
Quantum bullshit detector, if you're out there, our offer to have you on our show anonymously and answer some of these questions stands.
Yeah, I'm looking for at least 5 bullshits out of this picture today.
We will get to the bottom of it. For now, let's get on the bottom of your career in quantum, Zapata computing. Denise, it's all up to you.
Thanks, Andre. So, Chris, I've always been a huge fan of your career, and you have significant prior business experience as a CEO of a pharma company, and now you're CEO of a quantum startup. I mean, what difference do you see in this role now versus being CEO of a more established company?
Yeah, I think, well, I've been through, you know, with GNI, the pharmaceutical company, and, you know, we started actually there as a startup, 2 people all the way through IPO, where there were in the group hundreds of employees eventually. So, you know, everything from 2 people in a business plan to an IPO in that range. I've also worked, I was working at Nissan Motor Corporation, globally at the Nissan Renault Alliance in enterprise architecture. So I've worked for a global Fortune 50 company as well. So I guess my career has kind of spanned the gambit from, you know, academia to small company to very large company, global enterprise. I guess you know, the differences here are that we're I'm in an emerging company, obviously, but also in an emerging industry. And I guess I'm not new to that either. You know, when I started Dejima, which gave rise to a technology that eventually became incorporated into what we would know as Siri and Apple. That also was when Babak and I had a demo of the natural language understanding engine working basically in our small office and in our living rooms that did some of the things that Amazon Alexa does, like hey, record all of the football matches tonight between you know, Germany and blah, blah, blah in the World Cup. We were able to do that. And we were trying to sell this to investors, but people looked at us like we had 5 eyes because, you know, in 1998, you didn't even have the concept of talking to your TV or talking to your phone and getting an answer. I mean, this wasn't even, I mean, it sounded really crazy to even be suggesting that we would have that technology. And it was early because we didn't have some of the things we needed. We needed fast mobile network connections, ubiquitous smartphones, which we didn't have yet. So nice screens that you can look on things, really good embedded processors, all of these kind of things that we really needed to make it a product. We're not there yet. So I've kind of been through that stage before. So it's kind of reminiscent in a way to where we are with quantum computers. I think the big difference is that a lot of the things that we need to make quantum computers work are already existing. You know, the cloud is already here. A lot of the compiler technologies classically, we've already figured out. Superconductors, yeah, we need to get the error down in these things, but we have superconductors. There's no fundamental technology really that we're completely missing in this case. And algorithmically, on the software side, there's a lot of progress that's already been made in academia. So we're at a transition point where we're actually trying to make these things commercially relevant and commercially real. But I will say, you know, the acceleration of this is pretty breathtaking now. The speed at which we're making gains in both software and hardware. So it's reminiscent in the sense that it feels far away, but I also have this sense that the milestones are happening more and more quickly in this time around, I guess.
Okay, great. I also noticed that you just announced a scientific advisory board. Certainly a very impressive who's who in quantum and science. And what was your thinking in putting a board together and timing? And also, what advice would you give to other companies about a scientific advisory board?
Sure. So yeah, we have some really fantastic members on our scientific advisory board. Like you say, it reads kind of like a who's who of people on the algorithmic side of this world that we're in. But also some people who are like Will Oliver, who have quite some expertise on the hardware itself and who are there at the dawn of superconducting qubits in a very serious way. And the reason to put together a scientific advisory board, yeah, it's kind of self-explanatory in some sense. Maybe tried to say that to get scientific advice, but I mean that very truly and wholeheartedly. We're in a very technical field, and we're doing very technical stuff all the time. And we need to submit ourselves to the rigor of scientific review of what we're doing and our ideas. You know, some of the stuff we do is really on that bleeding edge, really. And you need people who really understand this very fundamentally, but who are also willing to be quite honest with you and bludgeon you. The difference in a company, though, is that sometimes we can't take our ideas and publish them right away because they contain trade secrets or things we want to patent or things that our customers are asking us to do. And therefore, we have to keep things kind of unpublished. And therefore, I think the risk for young companies in this field is if you don't have a board like that, you risk taking paths that have not been subjected to scientific scrutiny, and that's really dangerous. I mean, we're like I said, in a bleeding edge field, in a bleeding edge area, and you really need to be able to submit yourself to the scrutiny of something like peer review. Even if you're not reviewing your things in a formal peer review process, you really should be seeking that advice, whether you do it in a formal scientific advisory board like we've attempted to do, or you have very close people or consultants who are in that world. I would highly suggest that you do that because, you know, you can have a tendency in any engineering field, any scientific field, to really like your own stuff and really like your own ideas. And that's why we have peer review. And this is our way of getting peer review without necessarily having first to go to an actual peer review journal to get that feedback. And we find this to be critical to our thinking and to maintain our path on our scientific integrity.
Well, when I look at your website, you have, I think, 25 scientists. So is that the appropriate size of a company to have a scientific advisory board, or at what point do you think a startup should consider it?
I think it like everything, it depends. But I would say that when your scientific output and when your scientific output reaches a kind of a capacity where you really need to subject it to, you know, outside rigor, that's the right time to do it. And it may not be too early, even with two people, to have that. Well, is it appropriate to try and recruit 5 scientific advisors for 2 people? Maybe not, because you have to use some cash or some equity or something to incentivize these people to come to meetings. That's the way it works. But at some appropriate point, I would say, when you have scientific ideas, scientific papers, whether they're going, or patents that you're thinking of submitting, that is the time where you really have to get serious about it. What's the appropriate sizing for that? It's hard to say. I mean, one of the goals we had was also to try to get as much diversity as we could in thought, as well as other diversity areas. We're still looking for female members, as you know. So if you have any good top candidates, some that we gave offers to, unfortunately, were unable to join us. But we want to expand that. So diversity of thought, diversity of people, trying to get a good size for those reasons is really important, we think. So, we found, at least starting with this size and then hoping to expand it was the way to go, with 25 scientists. And they don't come every day, right? You have to think of everyone's time and trying to get everyone in the same room, because that's where the value really comes from these boards. It's not just names on a website. If you're really serious about this, you want to get them together, maybe not in the same room now with COVID, but soon, hopefully in the same room, but at least on the same Zoom session where you can present your scientific ideas, your papers, have your young scientific staff particularly benefit from that interaction, where they don't have a PI, so to speak, in an industrial situation. Having that interaction regularly is kind of important. So we try to strike a balance between having too many members that you can't get them all together and having too few.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that point of view. One more question. You've raised over $30 million, which is very impressive. PsiQuantum has raised $210 million, yet we see a lot of startups struggling. And what's your opinion on the current fundraising situation in quantum? Is there a quantum winner, as I hear a lot of people talk about, or what's your opinion?
I think this is a new terminology. I don't think we had a cloud winner or a big data winner, or I think it's just a normal, if you know the Geoffrey Moore cycle, there's always a chasm. There's always an early adopter group. Then there's, some disillusionment maybe while the technology is maturing. And then eventually a technology becomes adopted by a wider audience. I think this is no different than any other technology cycle that we've gone through before. So from that perspective, there are early adopters. There are companies who are already, even at this very early stage, nascent stage, putting in some money and investing. We've seen that. And it makes sense. And there's therefore some investment that's happening in early stage companies as well as at large companies into this area, because we're seeing that there is really an early adoption of the technology. And there will eventually be a later adoption by other people as the technology matures and we have formal proof that this stuff is working in business. Those will be later come people, and maybe they won't get as much of an advantage as the early adopters, just like it was with cloud, with big data, with all kinds of other technologies that we've seen adopted, computers themselves, right? So I think in that sense, there's a little bit of a hyping up of the overhyping, in a sense. This is not something that we haven't seen before. So will there be a quantum winner? There will be definitely this Geoffrey Moore chasm at some point, but not for all companies and not for all ideas and not for everything. There will be winners and losers. Some will pick the right technologies that will make it across the chasm, and some will unfortunately not, even at big companies, even at small companies. Some big companies may also end up being losers at the end of the day, even though they have the capital to make it technically across that chasm. Some new emerging companies, I believe, like in any new industry, new technology will emerge at the end of this cycle. So that, I think, is natural. I think the funding cycle also is natural, that you see these early adopting things happening. It's an exciting technology. Venture capitalists see it. People who are doing their postdocs are like, oh, I should start a company. And then everyone jumps in at once during this early adoption cycle at the beginning of the cycle. And there's obviously not enough space for everyone to make it over the chasm. So that is going to mean that there are going to be winners and losers in that process. Currently, I think that there's a little bit of consolidation going on in the funding raise. And I think that has been maybe hastened a bit from this COVID thing, and maybe it compresses the time in which some of those winners and losers are chosen, if you will, by the capital markets. And so maybe there's a bit of, I think, larger amounts of money chasing fewer and fewer deals, as things have matured. So I think you'll find fewer seed deals and fewer A rounds and more of the consolidation happening towards maybe the middle or later stage of startups as startups merge with greater customer numbers, more revenues, ARR starts to merge, and these kind of things. There'll be fewer early stage deals, I think, to be had in the area. And I think that's just a normal cycle and nothing different just because it's quantum.
Thank you. I also agree. I don't really believe the quantum winner term. I think there's capital out there, and I think there's a need for quantum, and it's just a matter of finding the right person and giving the right business case. And it's difficult, like it always is.
Yep.
But I don't think there's a particular winter, so I'm glad we agree on that. I'm going to hand it over to Tommaso now. So, Tommaso.
Sure. Thanks, Christopher. Very nice conversation so far. Look, I usually try to take things maybe a bit more from a scientific angle, and there are two points that you made during this conversation that I think are very interesting. The first one is about your career, which is a bit more diverse, I would say, maybe than most people in quantum computing today. And then the question there for you would be, was there a moment in the last 5-10 years maybe, where you really said, okay, this is my eureka moment for me, where I can see that the technology about quantum computing is really changing. And the day you woke up, you're like, hey, I really want to work on quantum computing. I want to, this is my future now. Or maybe there was no such thing, and it was a much more, natural process where you've been following the technology for many years, and it kind of happened. How was it for you?
So yeah, I think if you look at my career, which would take, like you said, just go to my LinkedIn. Maybe you can post it with the video or whatnot, and you can see the entire checkered path of that. But in a very unique way, I guess if I were to put it all in a 30-second elevator pitch of what I've done is, I've been involved in data analytics in one way or another since my early graduate career, and simulation. So I did molecular simulation of biophysical systems, particularly viral and cancer immunology, which is kind of interesting today that we're in this COVID situation. So, but in simulation and in data analytics, particularly in Bayesian network work that I had done in bioinformatics and this kind of area, we always hit up against these computational problems. Complexity was a problem, and we always had to take shortcuts. With all of these things. In molecular simulation, we would take shortcuts in order to model very complex molecular systems. In gene regulatory networks, we'd have to take, do all kinds of programming cuts, shortcuts to really get to our solutions. When I was doing big data work at Nissan, we would have to take shortcuts on, what size of latent space could we actually handle in these problems, and so you're always had to make compromises. So I guess this was some problem that had followed me throughout my career, and always I guess I was one of these renegades who was always trying to hit these problems. Natural language. Who would have chosen natural language as a problem to go after in the late 90s? There's not enough computation in the world to do that. These real NP hard problems or whatever complexity class you want to put on them is always a problem in compute on the high end of things, whether it's in simulation or in big data. And this happens, in things that affect small companies and large companies alike, and all parts of our economy. So I guess that's kind of a theme. So when Alain Asparagusic, my esteemed co-founder, one of the people who actually came up with the idea of having a NISQ algorithm with VQE in his lab, said, "Oh, I hear you're coming available. Oh, this is great news. Oh, because I'm spinning out Zapata." I said, "What is Zapata?" He said, "Oh, the quantum people, well, yeah, quantum chemistry. No. The quantum chemistry people and the quantum computing people in my lab are spinning out." I said, "Quantum computing?" Actually, to be honest, I was like, wow. Has there been progress in qubits? I mean, I had known about, some of the original papers and Pierre Shore stuff from the 90s. And yeah, as a theory, this is great, but can you actually do anything? Are there any qubits yet? I had not actually been following it. But Alon was like, yeah, no, there's real hardware now. It's really going to work. We need a software company to I'm like, with what, 2 qubits? But that's 2 to the 2. That's 4 bits. What am I going to do with that? Really. I mean, I took a very kind of skeptical approach, and he said, no. Come to my lab. Come tomorrow. And 10 hours later or less, I think I was sitting there in the Department of Chemistry at Harvard, and he and my current co-founders, the team. The 5 of them by lunchtime had convinced me that, look, there's hardware, there are actual qubits, that this is accelerating, there are actual things happening here, and that there is a need for actually ahead of the curve of having an enterprise framework, an enterprise software that will actually run these things. And to me, this made sense, because at the end of the day, there needed to be software to run this, but what problems could this handle? I mean, this was a theme that I had had in several industries and at several stages in my career, from pharmaceuticals to automotive to all of these places. I could see, wow, if this works, this could solve some of the very basic problems that I had approached in my career in so many areas. And so that I was convinced of. Was I completely convinced, to be honest, that we would get enough qubits with enough fidelity to get there on that first day? I was a little bit still skeptical, but I was willing to make that bet because it's so important. And I did see that companies actually were coming to Alon. Companies, and this was the problem he had, companies were coming to Alon and saying, how many qubits do I need to actually beat my classical algorithms? I want to know the answer, because I know that IBM's doing this, and I know that Google's doing that, and we've heard that, and we've talked to them, and so we want to be prepared. And he would go to, he said, look, I'm an academic lab. We don't do that. We don't do like consulting for you about what algorithms you have in your classical world and when we're going to beat your classical chemistry algorithms. That you need a company to go do that. And really, that was the impetus. Wow, these are big companies who are, to Denise's earlier question, this was the early adopter curve that really showed that this is going to happen. When big, and I've seen this throughout my career, when large companies that have a really large problem start throwing, 7 figures US dollars, like millions of dollars, into an area and get serious about it, that's when something's going to happen. That's when a revolution is going to happen. I've seen it a couple of times in my career, fortunately. And so that was my kind of recognition signal that, wow, this is serious. Companies are coming to Alon because they want to figure this out when that's going to happen. Wow, that's a value inflection. So we need to actually be a company that could help them figure that out with scientific integrity, so that it's not hype, so that it's not just some kind of hopeful wish. So I didn't want to be early. I wanted to be part of getting those answers to these companies so that they could make the right investment decisions at the right time. And there was a need for that. So that was the impetus, and that's how we started. And so by lunchtime, we kind of had a premise that this was what we were going to do. And after that, over the next hours and days and weeks, he started introducing me to people at all these companies as the CEO of Zapata that didn't exist yet. But Alon doesn't take no for an answer. So, I think IBM, Jay's team and Jerry's team, there were, and Anthony, that was one of the first calls that we made. Then Jeremy at PsiQuantum and some other people, titans in the field, really. And this is back in 2017, when I don't think anyone even knew that Jeremy was really doing a company, except people who knew him really closely, or at least they hadn't announced it. If you went to Psi, it was just their Psi symbol, and that's it. And now look, a couple of years later, $250 million of funding, pretty impressive progress that way. So I guess I can say in retrospect that it was the right decision. At the time, was I nervous about it? Yes. Did I have a strong feeling that this could work? Yes. But I've never been one in my career, as you can look through it, to shy away from those kinds of challenges. And I felt that all of these signals were doing this. And furthermore, on a personal level, wow, I can actually in a company have an impact on things like molecular simulation and quantum chemistry and drug discovery on that end, but also some of the big data stuff in automotive that I've been working on, like autonomous driving and all of these models, Bayesian statistics and Bayesian models for bioinformatics, but other areas as well. All of these things that have these high complexity problems that quantum computing will eventually be really apropos to address. And that to me was extremely exciting on a personal level, because it kind of tied everything that I had done, over the past couple of decades together. So long answer, but that's how it happened.
That's all right. Thank you. Thanks. And actually, okay, I have a follow-up, or maybe partially follow-up to that, which also connects to something you said before while you were talking with Denise. So you said that you believe that the technology is there. We basically don't need anything else, right? Or something along those lines. And it's quite interesting. You're right. I'll give it back to you, and then you can clarify that. But this is interesting because it reminds me of a talk that Chris Monroe has given last year in Singapore. So I go to the talk, and at the end of the talk, he says, like, look, we at IonQ believe, and I'm paraphrasing again, right? But basically the bottom line was, we believe that the technology is there. Is not a physics problem anymore. It's becoming an engineer, or maybe he said it's already become an engineering problem. Okay, I thought it was quite an interesting statement, right? So I don't use Twitter, but I write on LinkedIn something along those lines, and some people got really mad. They're like, no, this is
bullshit detector too.
It wasn't the bullshit detector. No, and I think they have they make a fair point, right? They say this is not true. We still have a lot of problems to understand in physics, algorithms, etc., etc. So maybe then the simple question for you would be, do you think there's something that is still missing in quantum computing to really make it useful, scalable, accessible? You can choose what angle to look at. Or do you think we are there, is really only a matter of scaling things up?
See, only and just are the words that I would avoid. I think that the basic science of if you had a qubit and could you do computationally useful things, that I think nobody would argue with, right? Or nobody would actually get into at the numbers that they do into quantum information science, and particularly into quantum algorithms, even as a theory. Theoretic.
Some people still think that we will not be able to reach the full tolerant threshold. So
it is engineering, but I think where it gets wrong, and where I will completely agree with the naysayers, is that it's not just engineering, right? Just means that that's simple. This is very hard engineering. This is very difficult stuff, and I think that the popular press and sometimes some people in the startup community, or even in the corporate community, downplay that part of it. The kind of engineering that we're doing is very hard. Nobody's done it before, right? By definition, this is not just engineering. This is really incredibly hard engineering that we're doing. But I will agree with Chris, who I respect greatly, in the premise that this is not. There's not real basic science risk here, in the sense that if you can create the system with low enough error and with these caveats, that it'll work. We know theoretically that it'll work. We know theoretically if we had a fault-tolerant computer, you would get speed up. We've known that for a couple of decades now. The question is, can we get there? I think all of the points along the dots along the line right here, if you connect the dots and you look at a trajectory, it kind of points to, and the acceleration of the amount of dots we're getting on that line tells us that, yes, we're going to get there. Are there going to be challenges? Are there going to be needed step functions and capabilities that will get us to the promised land of that fault-tolerant computer someday? Yes, but I don't tend to think in these hardcore binary dichotomies in science, right? I think in technology, most of these things are more of like a gradient, right? And so I don't think, okay, we're going to wake up one day and fault tolerance happens, error correction is perfect, and we have endless gate depth, and home run, we're done. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to be more like a NISC error that gets better and better and better and better and better and acceleratingly better, and our error correction gets better and better and better, and our actual commercial usage of these things becomes more and more and more practical, and that expands, and then more and more investment gets in, and you have an acceleration curve towards that eventual fault-tolerant promised land that we may or may not reach, to be honest. But I think along the way to getting there, many technologies will come out of this that are maybe not as we envision it, but that will give us some computational capabilities that are better than what we do now classically. So my bar for have we gotten there, have we crossed the chasm, is I think much lower than it would be for someone who comes from a hardcore computer science complexity theory background. They cannot even write a paper unless they show an exponential speed up, some asymptotic difference between what you can do in polynomial time on a classical computer and a fault-tolerant quantum computer or some kind of quantum computer or quantum device. And in the NISC era, that's kind of hard to do because you're talking about heuristics anyway, and it's kind of hard to do formal proofs on those anyway. So really, we're stuck in this regime where we have to prove it empirically, just like we do with neural nets in the classical world. And so I think it's really hard to prove to those people that we're going to get there. But my bar is, okay, can we prove to a business person that we have, for example, a constant factor speed up? I said that horrible word, constant factor, because what people would say, there's only a constant factor speed up if you're, someone coming from a theoretical background. Oh, that's horrible. That's the worst result you could possibly get. It's 2 times faster. Now, I think Denise might agree with me. If you go to a CIO or someone at IBM and you say, I'm going to make your system twice as fast at doing what you already do, and therefore half the cost of what you're spending on your HPC budget. That's significant. So, and that's a business, and that's sustainable. So I think we suffer, I think, a little bit from the kind of people who are participating here, who we need, who are theorists coming into this world, and the way they've been trained academically to think in terms of complexity theory, because that's what gets you a paper. And the people who are coming from a different perspective, from a business perspective, that's also legitimate, saying, no, I only need to be a little bit better or faster or more energy efficient, okay? Is that going to win us a business? Is that going to get you to supremacy? Maybe not, but depending on your definition, maybe yes. So I think that, we don't live in this world of binary decisions here. I think the real world works in terms of what engineering will it take to get us to the CIO and the CFO making that decision. And I think that that's the relevant question. And it's hard for theoretical people and physicists and people who've never lived in that world to really think in those terms. And so it's natural that people who've never been in that world or been in a startup world or seen technology work that way, been through a purchasing cycle with a big company before, that they will think in terms of these academic constructs. And maybe that's also not correct, would be, I mean, when we came up with this very simplistic natural language technique that used this distributed parser that we came up with, all the natural language theory people at the time said, oh, that's too simple, that's simplistic, that's just word spotting by this distributed system. Yeah, but it's an adaptive system and it works. And yeah, but it's not elegant. It's not 20 years of my theory papers don't support this. How could it? Yeah, but it works. And so we got Siri, and then we got Alexa. And now nobody argues about the theory of that or whether neural networks are appropriate for that or any of that. It's irrelevant, actually, as a business. That doesn't mean that the work that's done ahead of time in the academic work, that you don't draw upon that, and that's also not vital to a new technology in a new field. It's a vital part of training people. It's a vital part of the discipline that we have scientifically in approaching this, and even from an engineering perspective, but it's not the only perspective, I would say. And I think that that's sometimes what we have here in this quantum field is people using different languages to try to communicate completely different concepts and thinking sometimes, oh, the words overlap, so we're saying the same thing. No, we're not. And I think that we have to maybe, as we progress, develop a better vocabulary to talk about what we really mean by advantage and what we really mean by commercially viable and these kind of things.
I think also on the last point that you made, and I agree with it, it might naturally simply disappear. It won't be a discussion anymore. Like as it happens with all other technologies, at some point nobody's gonna say anything about quantum advantage because who cares? It's not who cares, but as long as the technology can generate value for someone, that's all you need, really.
Yep. and the theory will continue to exist. Classical computer science departments still issue PhDs last time I checked, even though we've solved a lot of the fundamental problems in computer science. So, but have algorithms even in the classical world pushed forward? Yes, that's not going to go away. So, and it forms a very important part of how we train our rigor in the field, even in classical computer science. So I don't think that you're giving something up when you acknowledge that, okay, that a business could exist here and do something that's inferior to your, idealized notion, utopian notion of what needs to happen.
I agree with that. Yes. Thank you. Thanks. Great answer. And I will pass it to André, who I believe has a few questions for you.
I have 12 questions for you, Christopher. And what you don't know, we have another special guest, a famous French philosopher, Marcel Proust. He can't be here in person. He passed away 98 years ago. So he is speaking to you through me. Your answers shall be between one word and one sentence long. If they are longer, Marcel Proust will cut you off. I know it is a challenge, but we can do it. No right or wrong answers. The Bruce Questionnaire, especially adapted for quantum technologies, first edition ever, season 2, episode 1 of Weekly Quantum World Detangled with our guinea pig, Christopher Savoie. Christopher, what is the principal aspect of your personality?
Ooh. Competency driven. I think that to a good, to a fault, maybe.
The German me likes that. The quality that you desire most in an entrepreneur?
Open-mindedness.
The quality that you desire most in a scientist?
Open-mindedness.
What is your best virtue?
Integrity.
What is your biggest flaw?
Sometimes too emotional.
What do you appreciate most about working in quantum technologies?
The people, the great scientists that I'm able to collaborate with.
And if not working in quantum technologies, and you've had many careers before, what would you love to do?
Actually, criminal defense work. Particularly, I volunteer for and donate to groups that help people who've been accused of a crime that they did not commit and are doing jail time. So that for me, criminal justice, particularly for underprivileged groups, is something I really care very deeply about.
That's desperately needed. Your favorite scientist?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
One word to one sentence.
Einstein.
Your favorite entrepreneur?
Toss-up. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
Okay. The combination of the two makes the ideal entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think you can't be maybe the same person at the same time. I think you need some kind of superposition, and then to at a particular time take a measurement and be one or the other.
Talking about superposition, let's get back to quantum computing. What is your favorite quantum computing modality?
Oh, I don't. Do you mean by physical architecture?
Superconducting, ions, photonic, something different.
I don't want to pick a favorite right now. That would be unfair to all of our partners.
Okay.
I like them all, but yeah, I have my thoughts about pluses and minuses. To be fair, I think there are pluses and minuses for each of the modalities that are out there. So I don't know if there's a super winner for any particular thing.
Well, we'll get an answer out of the emotional Christopher on another show. Your quantum dream?
Quantum dream is fault tolerance.
Your quantum nightmare?
Inability to get to sufficient fidelities to do something commercially useful.
imagine we get there and tomorrow you own the first universal quantum computer. Who would you give it to?
I'd like to say something like the world peace and something nice like that, but I actually mean it. I think it belongs in the realm first of problems that humanity faces, and I think that's one of my biggest motivations here in doing this. Is I think that things like climate change, things like disease simulation that we could have done a much better job of if we could handle these multidimensional problems better and quicker. With better models, in the COVID situation. These kind of big human problems are what I would like to see it applied to first.
And that's what I love about quantum. This is a typical answer, and I think it's something that a lot of us are working towards, and which makes it fun. And with that, we will conclude today's session. Thank you to my co-conspirators, Denise at Cambridge Quantum Computing, a sponsor of this videocast, my friend Tommaso, from Entropica Labs, also a sponsor of this little show. Join us at onequantum.org. We have our big Women in Quantum Summit, number 2, coming out at the end of this month. You can find it at onequantum.org. Savoie Kurisu, arigato gozaimasu. It was a pleasure. This concludes season 1. This concludes season 2, episode 1 of the weekly Quantum World Detangled. You are now detangled.